I never expected that a plumbing emergency would change my life. But that's exactly what happened when my impossibly handsome neighbor knocked on my door one rainy Tuesday afternoon. But to really understand, I have to take you back a little bit. Before the knock, before the flood, before him, my life ran on a schedule so precise you could set a clock by it. My name is Miles, and at 28, I'd built a comfortable, if somewhat solitary, existence as a freelance graphic designer. My world was largely confined to the four walls of my apartment, a digital landscape of color palettes and client revisions. It was a good life, a stable one, but quiet. Sometimes, the silence in my apartment was so profound it felt like a presence of its own. My apartment was on the third floor of a reasonably modern building, the kind with long, sterile hallways and anonymous, identical doors. It was my sanctuary. I knew the specific creak the floorboards made by the window, the hum of the refrigerator cycling on, the distant rumble of the city breathing outside. My routine was my armor against the unpredictability of the world. Coffee at 7, work by 8, a sad desk lunch at 1, and then more work until the evening light softened and I felt I'd earned a break. It was a life lived in neat, controllable boxes. And then there was Caleb. He lived in 3B, right next to my 3A. Caleb was not a neat, controllable box. He was a force of nature. He was a personal trainer, or at least that's what I'd pieced together from the gym logos on his tank tops and the sheer, unapologetic health that seemed to radiate from him. He moved with a kind of easy confidence that I could only ever dream of. I'd see him in the hallway, his keys jingling, a gym bag slung over a shoulder that looked like it was carved from stone. He'd always offer a quick, friendly smile and a "hey, man," that was casual and bright and felt like it was intended for someone far more interesting than me. From my perspective, he was a collection of sensory details. The solid thud of his door closing next door. The faint, clean scent of his laundry detergent that sometimes lingered in the hall. The low bass of his music that would occasionally vibrate through our shared wall. A steady, rhythmic pulse that felt like the building's own heartbeat. I'd built him up in my mind, of course. He was the quintessential guy next door, the kind you see in movies, the one who is effortlessly charming, impossibly fit, and, in my carefully constructed narrative, completely and utterly straight. He was an object of distant, safe admiration, a piece of art I could appreciate from behind the velvet rope of my own anxieties. I never imagined our worlds would do more than briefly touch in the hallway. We were two different species, orbiting the same sun but in entirely separate atmospheres. He was all vibrant energy and physical presence. I was quiet observation and internal monologue. He was out there, living in the world, while I was documenting it from behind a screen. That's how life works sometimes, isn't it? You create these stories about people, these neat little boxes to put them in, so you don't have to deal with the messy reality of who they might actually be. For 6 months, Caleb was just that, the handsome, unattainable neighbor in 3B. And I was perfectly content with that. Or so I told myself. The inciting incident, the event that shattered the comfortable silence of my life, began not with a bang, but with a frantic knock. It was a Tuesday. Rain was lashing against my window, and I was deep in the zone, tweaking the kerning on a logo for a new brand of organic dog food. The knock was sharp, insistent. It wasn't the gentle rap of a delivery person. It had an edge of panic to it. I pulled off my headphones, annoyed at the interruption. When I opened the door, Caleb was standing there. But this wasn't the calm, confident Caleb from the hallway. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were wide, and he was wearing a pair of sweatpants that were soaked from the knee down. Water was literally dripping from the cuffs onto the hallway carpet. He looked utterly wrecked, and for a second, my brain couldn't process the image. "Miles, right?" he asked, his voice a little breathless. I just nodded, my own voice apparently having decided to take a vacation. "I am so sorry to bother you, man. But I have a major problem." He gestured helplessly back toward his open apartment door. From where I stood, I could see water pooling on his hardwood floor, shimmering under the light. A pipe under my kitchen sink just exploded. It's everywhere. The building super is on his way, but he said he has to shut off the water to the whole line, probably for the rest of the day, to fix it. I just stared, my mind slowly catching up. A flood. He had a flood. Oh, wow. I managed, which felt like a contender for the most useless response in human history. That's terrible." He ran a hand through his damp hair, a gesture of pure frustration. Yeah, it's a disaster. Look, I know this is a huge ask, and we don't really know each other. But could I possibly use your shower? I was about to head to the gym, and now I'm covered in, well, ancient pipe water, he grimaced, and it was the first time I'd ever seen his perfect, confident facade crack. He looked vulnerable. He looked like a normal person having a ridiculously bad day. My brain went into overdrive. Caleb, in my apartment, in my shower. The idea was so far outside the realm of my daily reality that it felt like a scene from a movie. My internal monologue was screaming 1,000 different things at once, a chaotic mix of panic and, if I'm being honest, a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity. But my mouth, bless its simple, socially programmed heart, just said, yeah, of course. Come on in. And just like that, the barrier between our two worlds, the invisible wall I had so carefully maintained, dissolved into nothing. He stepped across my threshold, bringing the smell of rain and trouble and an overwhelming sense of reality into my quiet, ordered life. The neat box I had built for him was starting to fall apart. He stood awkwardly in my small entryway, dripping onto the welcome mat. Seriously, man, thank you. You're a lifesaver, he said, his gratitude so genuine it made me feel a little foolish for my internal panic. I grabbed a towel from the linen closet, one of the good ones I saved for guests I never actually had, and handed it to him. Our fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. It was nothing, a completely meaningless, accidental contact. But it sent a spark up my arm that was so sharp and unexpected it felt like a static shock. The bathroom's just down the hall to the left, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. Let me know if you need anything. He gave me another grateful smile, and then he disappeared down the hall. I was left alone in my living room, the sound of my own heart hammering in my ears. A moment later, I heard the click of the bathroom door, followed by the sound of the shower starting. Caleb was in my shower. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. I tried to go back to work, to focus on the dog food logo, but it was impossible. My apartment, usually a space of quiet solitude, was now charged with his presence. I could hear the muffled sound of the water running, the occasional clink of a shampoo bottle against the tile. I was acutely aware of him, of his physical body just a few feet away, in the most private space of my home. It felt like an invasion, but not an unwelcome one. It felt significant. After about 15 minutes, the water shut off. A few moments later, Caleb emerged from the hallway, a towel slung low around his hips, another one rubbing his wet hair. My breath hitched. Seeing him in the hallway was one thing. Seeing him like this, water droplets clinging to his shoulders and chest, his skin flushed from the heat, was something else entirely. It was like a statue had come to life in my living room. He wasn't just an abstract concept of handsome neighbor anymore. He was very, very real. Feeling human again, he said with a small, self-deprecating laugh. Thanks again, Miles. I owe you 1 inch. His eyes met mine, and there was a warmth in them I'd never seen before, a genuine appreciation that went beyond neighborly politeness. This was different. This was a connection, forged in the absurdity of a burst pipe. It's no problem, really, I said, trying to keep my gaze fixed on his face and not elsewhere. Is there anything else I can do? Is your apartment, a total loss? He sighed, the confident persona slipping away again to reveal a tired, stressed-out guy. It's bad. The super got the water shut off, but the floor is probably ruined. I've got to call my insurance, find a restoration company. It's going to be a mess for a while. He looked around my apartment, at my neat stacks of books and organized workspace. You've got a nice place. Calm. Thanks, I said. It's where I work, so I try to keep it from getting too chaotic. A thought occurred to me, a bold, terrifying thought that flew out of my mouth before I could stop it. Listen, if you need a place to work, or just to get away from the noise and the mess over there, you're welcome to hang out here. I have coffee. The offer hung in the air between us. I immediately wanted to take it back, to retreat into my shell. It was too much, too soon. But Caleb's face broke into a relieved smile. Really? That would be amazing. I was just wondering where I was going to be able to take calls, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. I saw past the gym body and the easy confidence. I saw a vulnerability, a flicker of someone just trying to hold it together. He ended up spending the rest of the afternoon on my couch, his laptop balanced on his knees, a mug of my coffee in his hand. He was on the phone for hours, his voice a low, steady murmur as he navigated the bureaucratic nightmare of insurance claims and contractors. I sat at my desk, pretending to work, but I was mostly just listening to the sound of his voice filling the space that was usually silent. It was strange having him there. My sanctuary had been breached, but it felt better, less empty. At one point, he got off a particularly frustrating call and let out a heavy sigh, dropping his head back against the couch cushions. "Sorry about all this," he said, looking over at me. "I'm probably ruining your concentration." "Not at all," I lied smoothly. "It's nice to have some background noise for a change." We fell into an easy silence for a moment. Then he said something that surprised me. "You know, that painting above your desk is incredible. Did you do that?" I glanced at the abstract watercolor I'd done years ago, a swirl of blues and grays that I kept meaning to replace. "Oh, that? Yeah, just a hobby. From a long time ago, I was always a bit embarrassed by it, feeling it was amateurish." "No, it's really good," he said, his gaze fixed on it with a surprising intensity. "There's a lot of feeling in it. It's calming, but also kind of sad." He had seen it. He hadn't just glanced at it. He had actually looked at it and seen something I thought was hidden. It was a small thing, but it felt huge. He wasn't just some muscle-bound jock. He had a thoughtful, observant side that I never would have guessed at. That was the moment my perception of him truly began to shift, when the caricature I'd invented started to be replaced by a complex, interesting person. That evening, as the restoration crew's loud industrial fans were next door, he offered to buy me dinner as a thank you. We ordered pizza and ate it sitting on my living room floor, talking for hours. He told me about his clients, about the satisfaction he got from helping people achieve their goals. He asked about my design work, and his questions were smart and insightful. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely curious. We were leaning against the couch, the empty pizza box between us, when our hands accidentally brushed as we both reached for a napkin. It was the same jolt as before, but this time it lingered. We both pulled back quickly, a sudden, awkward tension filling the comfortable space we had created. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, confusion, maybe, or something else I couldn't dare to name. It was a small, significant moment, a tiny crack in the platonic surface of the evening. And it left me wondering, for the first time, if maybe the story I'd written about him was completely wrong. The next day, his apartment was still an uninhabitable zone of loud fans and damp carpets. He knocked on my door in the morning, looking apologetic. "Hey," he started. "I feel like I'm taking massive advantage of your kindness, but any chance the shower offer is still on the table?" "Of course," I said, maybe a little too quickly. My heart did a nervous little flip-flop. I was not prepared for a repeat of yesterday's half-naked encounter, but I also couldn't say no. I was caught in this strange new territory between neighborly duty and a hope so fragile I was afraid to even look at it directly. He went in, and once again, the sound of the water running filled my apartment. This time it felt different. It wasn't just a surprising, one-off event. This was becoming a routine, a strange, temporary domesticity. After a few minutes, his voice called out from the bathroom, muffled by the door. "Hey, Miles. Sorry, but I think I used the last of that body wash you gave me yesterday." My mind raced. The only other body wash I had was my own, a sandalwood and amber scent I was particularly fond of. Hang on," I called back. I went to my bathroom cabinet, my hands feeling clumsy as I grabbed the bottle. I walked down the hall and knocked lightly on the bathroom door. Got it. The door opened a crack. A cloud of steam billowed out, warm and humid. Caleb's hand reached out, water dripping from his fingertips. But instead of just taking the bottle, he opened the door a little wider. He was standing there, water sluicing over his shoulders and chest, the steam clinging to him. The towel from yesterday was nowhere in sight. My eyes darted away, trying to find a neutral spot on the tiled wall to focus on. "Thanks," he said, his voice a little lower than usual. He took the bottle, his fingers grazing mine again. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. The contact lasted for a beat too long, a silent acknowledgement of the charged air between us. He was looking right at me, his expression unreadable through the steam. Then, a slow grin spread across his face. It was a playful, teasing kind of smile, but his eyes held something else, something more serious. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "This would be a lot faster if you just wash my back for me." The words hung in the steam-filled space between us, electric and terrifying. It was a joke. It had to be a joke, right? This is what guys like him did. They made casual, flirty jokes that didn't mean anything. It was a test, a line thrown out to see what would happen. The smart, safe part of my brain, the part that had run my life for 28 years, screamed at me to laugh it off, to hand him the bottle and close the door. But another part of me, a part that had been dormant for a very long time, was tired of being safe. It was tired of watching from the sidelines. It saw the challenge in his eyes, but it also saw a flicker of the same vulnerability I'd seen the day before. He was taking a risk, too. And in a moment of reckless bravery that felt completely alien to me, I decided to meet him there. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't say anything. I just held his gaze, stepped over the threshold into the steam-filled bathroom, and gently closed the door behind me. The click of the latch echoed in the small space, a sound of finality, of no turning back. The air was thick and hot, smelling of soap and steam in him. The sound of the water hitting the tile was a deafening roar. Caleb hadn't moved. He just watched me, his playful smile fading into something more intense, more questioning. It was as if he'd laid down a dare and was genuinely shocked that I had accepted it. The moment stretched, taut and silent, except for the rushing water. I took the bottle of body wash from his hand, my own hands trembling slightly. I squeezed a small amount into my palm, the cool gel a stark contrast to the heat of the room. I lathered it between my hands, my eyes still locked with his. He turned his back to me slowly, a silent invitation. And then, I touched him. My hands, covered in foam, made contact with his warm, wet skin. A shudder went through him at the initial contact, a sharp intake of breath that was lost in the sound of the shower. His back was a landscape of taut muscle and smooth skin, broader and more solid than I could have imagined. I started to move my hands in slow, deliberate circles, the soap slicked between my palms and his skin. This was intimacy of a kind I had never experienced. It was completely nonverbal, a conversation being had through touch and proximity. I could feel the tension in his shoulders, the way his muscles bunched under my fingers. I worked at a knot I found near his shoulder blade, and he let out a low sigh, his head dropping forward. The sound was deeply personal, unguarded. In this small, steamy space, stripped of all our usual defenses, we were just two people. The world outside that shower ceased to exist. There were no client emails, no apartment floods, no unspoken questions. There was only the heat of the water, the scent of sandalwood, and the feeling of his skin under my hands. I wasn't thinking. I was just feeling. For the first time in a long time, I was completely present in my own body, in that single, charged moment. My entire universe had shrunk to the space of that shower stall, to the inches that separated us. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It changed everything. When I finished, my hands stilled on his back. He didn't move for a long moment. Then, he turned around to face me. The water was plastering his hair to his forehead, and his eyes, a shade of hazel I hadn't noticed before, were dark and serious. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt completely exposed, as if he could see every hope and every fear I'd ever had. He lifted a hand and gently brushed a stray drop of water from my cheek. His touch was feather-light, but it burned a trail on my skin. "Miles," he whispered, his voice hoarse. And that was it. Just my name. But the way he said it, filled with a question and a revelation all at once, was more than enough. He leaned in, and I met him halfway. The days that followed were a masterclass in awkwardness. The profound intimacy of that moment in the shower was immediately followed by a retreat into our respective shells. After he left my apartment that afternoon, with a mumbled thanks and a quick exit that felt more like an escape, a thick, unspoken tension descended upon our little corner of the third floor. The air in the hallway, once neutral territory, now crackled with everything we weren't saying. We fell into a strange, stilted dance of avoidance. I'd find myself hesitating before leaving my apartment, pressing my ear to the door to listen for any sign of him in the hall. Once, I saw him heading for the elevator and I ducked back inside my doorway, my heart hammering, waiting until I heard the ding of its arrival and departure before I dared to step out. It was cowardly and ridiculous, and I hated myself for it. The few times we couldn't avoid each other were excruciating. A chance meeting by the mailboxes became a flurry of dropped keys and forced, tight-lipped smiles. We'd exchange hollow pleasantries. How's the apartment? Getting there. Our eyes refusing to meet for more than a split second. The easy camaraderie we'd started to build was gone, replaced by this brittle, fragile silence. He seemed just as flustered as I was, which was the only thing that gave me a sliver of hope. The confident, easygoing Caleb had vanished, replaced by someone who seemed to be overthinking every move as much as I was. My mind, of course, became a torture chamber of analysis. I replayed the shower scene on a continuous loop, dissecting every single frame. I examined it from every possible angle, searching for meaning, for clues, for anything that could tell me what was going on in his head. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd said my name, the way his breath had hitched when I first touched him. These were my data points, the evidence I presented to the ruthless judge and jury that lived in my brain. 1 minute, I would be filled with a soaring, dizzying hope. It meant something. It had to have meant something. It was a joke that turned into something real, a spark that caught fire in the humid air. He felt it too. The awkwardness wasn't rejection, it was mutual fear. He was as scared of this unexpected connection as I was. In these moments, the world felt full of color and possibility. My sad desk lunch tasted like a gourmet meal. The dog food logo I was designing seemed like a masterpiece of modern art. But then, inevitably, the fear would creep back in, cold and suffocating. The doubt would whisper its poison in my ear. It was a prank. He was just messing with me, the quiet, lonely guy next door. He was a confident, handsome jock, and I was me. He was probably laughing about it with his friends. The joke went further than he expected, and now he was embarrassed and trying to distance himself. The awkwardness wasn't fear, it was regret. His regret. In these moments, my apartment felt like a cage, the silence pressing in on me, amplifying my insecurities until they were screaming. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound from his apartment. The whirring of the industrial fans had been replaced by the sounds of repairmen during the day and a heavy silence at night. Was he even staying there? Was he avoiding the building altogether? Was he avoiding me? I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in this limbo of not knowing. The ambiguity was worse than outright rejection. Rejection would hurt, but it would be a clean wound. This was a slow, agonizing bleed. I tortured myself with the what ifs. What if I had just laughed it off? What if I had just handed him the body wash and closed the door? We could have gone back to being friendly neighbors. I could have held on to my safe, distant crush, and he could have remained the perfect, uncomplicated guy next door. But I had stepped over the line. I had taken the risk. And now I was suspended in the terrifying space between what was and what could be. Terrified I had broken everything and gained nothing. The hope was the worst part, really. It was the hope that was killing me. Because without hope, there could be no disappointment. 3 days after the incident, 3 days of hallway avoidance and sleepless nights, I was working late when I heard a knock on my door. It was soft, hesitant, nothing like the frantic banging from before. My entire body went rigid. I knew it was him. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I wasn't home, to hide from the conversation I knew was coming. But I couldn't. I couldn't live in this state of suspense for another second. I walked to the door, my legs feeling like lead. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the worst, an apology, an awkward explanation, the final, crushing nail in the coffin of my ridiculous hopes. I opened the door. Caleb was standing there, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. He wasn't smiling. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, his gym bag persona completely stripped away. He was just a guy, looking like he was about to face a firing squad. His hands were shoved into his pockets, and he was shuffling his feet slightly. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet. He wouldn't quite meet my eyes, focusing instead on a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. "Hey," I replied, my own voice barely a whisper. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy with everything that had happened and everything that hadn't been said. Finally, he took a breath and looked at me, his gaze direct and filled with a raw vulnerability that took my breath away. Can we talk for a minute?" he asked. I just nodded, stepping back to let him in. He walked into my living room, the same space where he'd taken frantic phone calls and eaten pizza, But the atmosphere was completely different. It was charged, heavy, like the air before a storm. He didn't sit down. He just stood in the middle of the room, turning to face me. "Look, Miles," he started, running a hand over the back of his neck, a nervous gesture I was starting to recognize. "I need to apologize. I've been acting like a complete idiot for the past few days, avoiding you. It wasn't fair, and I'm sorry." My stomach twisted. Here it comes, I thought. The "let's just be friends" speech. The "it was just a joke" explanation. "It's okay," I said, my voice flat, trying to brace myself. "No, it's not okay," he insisted, shaking his head. "Because I'm the one who made things weird." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "About the other day in the shower. I wasn't just joking. I mean, it started as a joke, I guess. A stupid, reckless one. But when you actually stepped inside, He trailed off, looking down at the floor. He looked back up, his eyes pleading with me to understand. "Here's the thing. My pipe did burst. That part was real. But it wasn't nearly as bad as I made it out to be. I exaggerated. A lot. I used it as an excuse." I stared at him, confused. "An excuse for what?" "An excuse to talk to you," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "I've wanted to talk to you for months, ever since I moved in. Not just, hey, in the hallway. I'd see you, and you always seemed so self-contained. So interesting. But I'm an idiot when it comes to this stuff. I didn't know what to say. I see you, and my brain just goes blank. So when the pipe leaked, I saw an opportunity. A really dumb, dramatic opportunity. My mind was reeling, trying to process his words. He had wanted to talk to me. He had noticed me. The entire foundation of the narrative I had built, the one where I was invisible to him, was crumbling around me. "The joke in the shower," he continued, his voice softer now. "That was me being a coward. I was testing the waters. I was so sure you were going to laugh and shut the door, and then I'd know, and I could just move on. But you didn't, and it completely threw me. Everything I thought I knew was wrong, and it terrified me. So I ran. I've spent the last 3 days freaking out because I finally got what I wanted, a real moment with you, and I had no idea what to do with it. I just stood there, speechless. Every anxious thought, every paranoid fear I'd had for the past 3 days was wrong. The awkwardness wasn't his regret. It was his fear, the same fear that had been tying me in knots. I feel the same way," I heard myself say, the words feeling foreign and brave on my tongue. "I thought you were. I don't know. I had this whole idea of who you were, and I was sure I was just the quiet guy next door. When you invited me in, I was terrified. But I was more terrified of not knowing, of letting that moment pass." A slow wave of relief washed over Caleb's face, so profound it was like watching the sun come out from behind the clouds. "Really?" he breathed. "Really," I confirmed, a real smile, my first in days, spreading across my face. He closed the distance between us in 2 quick steps. He stopped right in front of me, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from him. He gently cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones. "I am so tired of being scared, Miles." "Me too," I whispered. And then he kissed me. It wasn't like the hesitant, questioning moment in the shower. This was different. This was sure. It was a kiss full of relief and apology and the promise of a beginning. It was the end of the silence, the end of the guessing. It was the start of something new. And it was better than anything I could have ever allowed myself to hope for. In the weeks that followed, my quiet, orderly life was beautifully, irrevocably disrupted. The silence in my apartment was replaced by Caleb's easy laughter, the low hum of his voice on the phone, the playlist he'd put on while he cooked us dinner in my kitchen. His apartment was eventually restored to its former glory, but more often than not, he ended up at my place anyway. It turned out our 2 separate worlds fit together more perfectly than I ever could have imagined. We went on our first real date a week after the confession. We went to a small Italian restaurant downtown. It was nerve-wracking and wonderful. We talked for hours, filling in the gaps of the 6 months we had spent as strangers living on opposite sides of a wall. I learned that he was a voracious reader of historical fiction, that he was terrified of spiders, and that the reason he got into personal training was to help his father recover from a serious illness. He learned that I was a terrible cook, that I could name almost any movie from the 90s by a single line of dialogue, and that I was far less quiet once you got to know me. He loved my art. He went with me to buy a new frame for the watercolor above my desk, insisting it deserved to be displayed properly. He encouraged me to start painting again, and for the first time in years, I did. I found that the colors came more easily now, brighter and more vibrant than they had been before. My life was no longer a palette of muted blues and grays. It was bursting with color. Our relationship unfolded in a series of small, perfect moments. The first time he stayed the night, just to sleep, and I woke up to find his arm thrown protectively over me. The first time he called me from the grocery store to ask if I needed anything. A simple, domestic act that felt more profound than any grand romantic gesture. The way he'd leave a fresh pot of coffee for me in the mornings before he left for the gym. It was in these quiet, everyday details that we built our foundation, a connection that felt both thrillingly new and comfortably familiar. One evening, a month or so after our first kiss, Caleb came out of my bathroom after a shower, a towel wrapped around his waist, just like that first day. He walked over to where I was sketching on the couch and leaned down to kiss the top of my head, his hair still damp. The scent of sandalwood and amber, my body wash, enveloped me. It had become our scent. He looked at me with that same playful grin I remembered from the steam-filled bathroom door. "Got any more of that body wash?" he asked, his voice a low, teasing murmur. I smiled back at him, a genuine, easy smile that reached my eyes. I put my sketchbook down, stood up, and wrapped my arms around his neck. "Always," I said, before pulling him down for a kiss. It was a simple callback to the moment that started everything. But now, all the fear and uncertainty were gone, replaced by a deep, comforting sense of rightness. I used to think that life was about building walls to protect yourself, about creating routines to keep the chaos at bay. I spent so much time in my quiet, controlled world, observing life from a safe distance. But Caleb, with his fake plumbing emergency and his real, terrifying vulnerability, smashed right through those walls. He showed me that the most beautiful things in life don't happen in the safe zones. They happen when you take a risk, when you step into the steam and close the door behind you, not knowing what you'll find on the other side. You never know when a simple knock on the door might be an invitation to change your entire life, do you? You just have to be brave enough to answer it.